Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Gary Allen. I'll be your host and speaker today. And today we're talking about how to build $1 million law practice. I appreciate your joining me, and I hope you'll get some value out of this presentation. So this webinar is eligible for credit through the Association of Legal Administrators. So if you're an ALA member, you can take advantage of that. If you're not an ALA member and you're a legal administrator, I want to give a little plug for this organization. It's a really one-of-a-kind organization for both community as well as education for legal administrators. So check it out if you are interested in joining that organization. So just to introduce myself, I was just recently retired from a 35-year career as a practicing attorney in a mid-sized firm. When I graduated from Stanford Law School many years ago, I got exactly zero education in the business of law. And so I did what many of my classmates did, and I chose to work for a firm, a small to mid-sized firm in that case. And I went in, these are great lawyers and really great people, but they weren't necessarily the best at the way they ran their business. And so as a result, a couple of years into my practice, that firm imploded. And it happened to me again a couple of years later. I was in a branch office of a large mid-sized firm and got a call from the managing partner on a Saturday afternoon telling me I no longer had a job. And I had a 6-month-old baby to feed at the time. So I was fortunate at that point to land in a really great 40-lawyer law firm, and it's 40-lawyer law firm now, that really understood the business of law. And not only did I make a lot more money working in that firm, I was also much happier. And it was instantaneous once I started working there. There's just a lot of unnecessary stuff that went away. So all of that is to say that I've become very passionate about helping lawyers have profitable and happy practices. And that's, the impetus behind this content today. I'm also the founder of Lean Law, which is makes financial software to fit into a best-in-class legal software stack especially designed for small to mid-sized firms. So if you're interested in that, you're welcome to get in touch with me after the webinar. So since this kind of starts with profitability and good business practices in law firms, I want to just touch on that for a moment to give you some context here. A lot of law firms really don't know where they stand financially. And so I put together this little widget to help with that. You'll get a copy of it after the webinar. And it'll help you to kind of assess where your firm is from a financial standpoint. And it measures some basic metrics that we'll talk about in a minute, and gives you, I call it the warning lights for your business, because it compares to industry benchmarks and tells you where you stand, tells you where you have room for improvement. So for a lot of firms, this is a big wake-up call when they do this. I call it the $8 million wake-up call. And so what I've got on this slide is a theoretical comparison between an average law firm and a best-in-class law firm based on the practice of a typical lawyer in one of those firms. So we have here some basic metrics for law firms: capacity, billable utilization, realization, collection, overhead, profit, and then lifetime profit. And capacity is just assumed to be 1,800 hours a year at $300 an hour, so 540,000 for each of these lawyers. And then we just say, okay, uh, the utilization, how much of that time is actually used for billable time? In an average firm is about 78% compared to 95% in the best-in-class firm. The real the realization relative to that is that's how much of that's actually billed is 83% versus 95. Collection 89% versus 95. Overhead 48%. This is a percentage of overhead is a percentage of revenue, not including salaries. Longer story there. Ask me if you have a question about that. 30% in a best-in-class firm. So when you run those numbers, and they seem like, okay, those are marginal differences. What's the big deal? The profit per attorney in the average firm, that's what the firm can afford to pay that lawyer and still be profitable, is $118,000. But in a best-in-class firm, it's $318,000. So triple essentially. So you've got a huge opportunity to improve profitability in most law firms. A couple $100,000 a year per lawyer, which adds up to 8 million, the difference between the lifetime profit in a best-in-class firm and in an average firm over the course of a 40-year lawyer's career. So that's a big deal. I don't know a lot of lawyers who can afford to leave $8 million on the table. So that's the context of the conversation we're going to have about building your own $1 million practice. One last part about this is, okay, so you've got profitability issues in your firm. What do you do about it? I boiled that down into really three buckets. One is efficient processes, two is productive people, and three is product and service alignment. So we're not going to talk about all of those today. We're going to be focused on one of the aspects of productive people, which is the $1 million rainmaker, who is the heart of every law firm. So that's really the engine, I should say, for a great law firm. So we're really talking about a critical element of a highly profitable law firm. It's also, I assume most of you probably joined out of your personal interest of achieving a practice like that, but you also contribute greatly to your firm if you do that. All right, so who should care about this webinar? Managing partners of law firms. This is a very important part of what you do in terms of helping the other lawyers in your firm succeed, helping your firm succeed. Any lawyer in private practice. This is, I think, a goal for a lot of people. We'll talk about exactly what a $1 million practice means in a second, but it's something many lawyers aspire to. And also importantly, legal administrators who are often left out of the sort of marketing and practice development part of what law firms do. And I want to offer some thoughts on how you can help to build others, the lawyers in your firm, to build great practices, and what that what that means for your firm and for your position as the admin. So the partners are the engines of the firm. So this is how you develop your staff, especially the legal staff in the firm, and how you increase your value to the firm. So I think it's something that's overlooked sometimes, but very, very important to your overall career development. All right, so I wanted to start by defining what I mean by $1 million practice, because the number is meaningless, or relatively meaningless. $1 million practice in a small town is a pretty big deal. $1 million practice in New York or Los Angeles, maybe not such a big deal. So maybe it's a $5 million practice there It's really an indication of success as a an overall success in practice, frankly. I put some um, things here that I think help define what I mean. So if you got $1 million practice, you are in all likelihood a recognized expert in your field. In all likelihood, you're going to command a premium for your work. You know, you're going to be financially successful in that way. You're going to have loyal clients and who treat you as a trusted advisor and not just as a commodity that could be replaced easily by another lawyer. You likely have sustained demand for your practice. In fact, you may have too much demand. It's what I hear from a lot of people I know who are at this level. You've built a strong team around you. Typically, that will include other lawyers, but it might include paralegals, it might include key staff members. You're not going to get to this level by yourself. Now, if you are practicing in New York City, you can often bill $1 million a year in your own of your own work. But again, that's not really the point here. This is about building something larger than yourself. And then finally, you will will have learned to delegate and to build scalable systems that will allow you to manage a large amount of work on an ongoing basis. So that's what we're shooting for when we talk about $1 million practice. Something I and a bunch of other people in my firm achieved over the course of our careers and kind of learned to routinize it so that it was, a predictable outcome of somebody's career if they, this is something they wanted and that they followed some, relatively simple practices. All right, so I just want to stop there for a second. I'm going to give you a little homework here, a question to take back after the webinar and think about, and that is just what obstacles prevent you from commanding premium rates or building a team. I'm going to forecast a little bit something I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But when I first moved from San Diego to Boise, Idaho, it was like the highest rates in town were less than $200 an hour for lawyers. And I couldn't believe this coming from San Diego because as a third year associate, my fourth year associate, my rate was already higher than that. There'd been a culture built around insurance defense. And so people were very afraid of billing premium rates because they thought they needed the insurance work and if they asked for more, they would be cut out of that. It turned out not to be true. And over the next number of years, that changed a lot. I mean, my firm was part of pushing that. But many times we feel those kind of obstacles and we're afraid to confront clients and to ask for the value that we're providing. So I want you to think about what might be getting in your way and building a team as well. So, and we'll get into more of what that means. Another really important point I want to make, and something I learned over a period of time practicing is I think everybody can have a $1 million practice if they want one. I mean, it's not for everybody because it's a lot of work and there's a broad set of skills that you need. And, it may not be what you want. But if you do, I think it's in the grasp of most people. And I'm mostly talking here to people who are maybe less than 10 years out of law school and are just kind of getting into the place where you're starting to generate clients and you're starting to, become that rainmaker, and it feels really, really hard at that point because you may have partners you're working for who have huge books of business and kind of occupy the field, it feels like, and or you may just not quite have earned or the clients might not trust you yet just because you don't have enough gray hair or whatever reason. But the point I want to make is that rainmaking is a natural and normal part of law practice given enough time. I think it is not realistic for most, some firms require that you've established a significant book of business if you're going to be made partner. And I think, that's unrealistic given that, that's usually, somewhere between 5 and 10 years out of law school, you're being considered for partnership. And at that point, you should have a few of your own clients, but I wouldn't necessarily expect a large book of business at that point. So one of the things I picked up is that there are really distinct phases of a lawyer's career that people pretty predictably follow. For the first 5 years, you're really just learning to practice. You're learning to not just do legal research, but also go to court, negotiate a deal, some just learning the basics of how to practice law. In larger firms, it can sometimes be longer than that just because you are behind other lawyers and you're, doing more research and other behind the scenes work so that there's more of the front office work that you need to learn later on. But essentially everybody spends the first few years learning those things. 5 to 10 years, you're learning to manage a matter, including dealing with the client and kind of overseeing the whole course of the matter. Then at 10 to 15 years, say you're 35 to 40 years old, that point, you'd start to have enough, maybe gray hair, but at least gravitas so that clients start to trust you with matters. And, they're going to tend to be smaller at that point. They may not be as profitable as what you're used to working on because they're smaller matters and maybe for smaller clients. But in any case, you're going to start to have the opportunity to work with clients from the beginning, work all the way through the matter. And then it just starts to flow from there. And from 15 to 20 years on, and you're likely to see just continued growth. And if you do some of the other things I'm going to talk about later, that can facilitate a very large practice. And, like I say, it has to be something you want. And some lawyers achieve parts of this and not other parts. We had a really amazing lawyer who was a Public Utilities commissioner in my firm before he came out and went into private practice. And he really owned that practice for the public utilities, small practice in Idaho. But he was great at that, but he wasn't really that interested in developing a mentee and having a bigger book of business to hand out. So he took very good care of himself, but didn't create the larger practice, didn't create the $1 million practice. And that was just fine for him. Okay, so, but remember this point and have confidence that you're going to be able to get where you want to go over time in your career. Don't feel bad if you're, struggling with that at age 30, 35, even age 40. So the next thing I want to talk about is just what's holding you back. And one thing I learned in 35 years of practice is that many of us lawyers hang on to a lot of fear. And that's probably the number one thing that holds us back. And that fear expresses itself in a number of ways. First of all, you you cling to your work. You worked really hard to bring that client in, and there's a young associate who needs some work, but you're a little nervous about the market, and so you keep the matter and don't allow that person to who had been maybe more suited for the level of work to take it on and start to grow. Instead, you hang on and you keep that for yourself. That's a sure way to kind of shut off that pipeline that you need in order to build a team and get where you need to go. I've touched on the next one already, which is you keep your rates too low, that you're afraid your clients are going to run off somewhere else. And, or somebody's going to undercut you on price and you're going to lose your clients. And, first of all, let go of that, that fear is not going to help you to keep your clients or grow your practice. And secondly is if you're worried about price competition, you've totally positioned your practice incorrectly. That you've become a commodity at that point, where every lawyer should be looking to have a unique niche where they can command premium rates and get more from their, get more respect from their clients and more loyalty without having to compete on price. Another aspect of that is that, you take any matter that comes through the door. And, I landed thousands of matters over the course of my career. And there's like 10% of them where I was just like, why did I take that work? And of course, there's the old saying that the best client that you ever had is the one that you didn't take. And I want to reinforce that today, looking back on my career, that it's that you will benefit so much in the long run from taking a hard look at that work when it comes in the door. And if it isn't a really great fit for your practice, turn it away. Even if you have nothing else to do, turn it away and go find something better, because it will bite you every time. And the flip side of that is just hanging on to a toxic client or an incompatible practice. So, I remember there was one client that we landed who was known for being highly litigious, and we thought that would be a great thing because, hey, they're going to spend a lot on lawyers. But they were so terrible to us that it was totally not worth it. And we wound up having, an ugly divorce a year or so on into the matter. And the same thing goes for incompatible practices, where, well, I mean, the most famous thing in my firm's history is we were generally a business law firm, but at one point brought on a prominent lawyer who had a plaintiff's employment practice. And we thought we could kind of separate those things out, but it was a real anathema to our business clients and, created a lot of problems for many years. And finally, there was an amicable parting there, but, we would have been much better off if we had never jumped into that ourselves. And certainly, if that's affecting your own practice, that's even more toxic. The next thing I want to talk about is that you got to understand your unique skills. And if you don't, you're going to be held back as a lawyer. And I think this is hard for lawyers, a lot of lawyers. And I certainly didn't understand what I really did well for a long time when I was practicing. Um, but you'll know it when you have that matter that just goes incredibly well, and you just have this unbelievable result, and you did something that seemed like it was magic, and it's like, okay, so what was that? And how do I do more of that and less of other things, even if that, if I'm delegating within my firm or just not taking matters that don't fit that specific niche completely. So we'll talk about that more a little bit later. And the last thing I want to talk about is a lack of trust. That you've got your favorite client who you love, and you are but they've got a matter that just really doesn't fit your billable rate, or that you don't have time for, and you think, oh, I just can't hand this off to my young associate. I just don't trust that they're going to be able to handle it the way that I would, and the client's going to want to talk to me, etc. But you need to expect that your teammates are going to exceed you. My mentee exceeded me significantly in her practice, which is really exciting to me. So Da Vinci said that poor is the apprentice who does not exceed the master. And I think the converse of that is also true, that poor is the master when their apprentice does not exceed them. So you should think of it as a real honor if someone below you or younger than you grows up and kicks butt. That should be very exciting for you as a $1 million practitioner. All right, so another question to take home and think about. So if you continue to underpricing or coddling toxic clients, how's that going to affect your ability to grow $1 million practice? And to just add another point onto that, how is that going to affect that $8 million gap in profitability that you may be experiencing because of just the general practices of your firm or how you're behaving in your own practice? So as I was thinking about what makes a $1 million practice, I kind of came up with this pyramid here. And I think it says a lot as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to go through it briefly here, and then I'll pick on a couple pieces of it and for future slides. But there's a foundation to it all, which I think you've got to have. I guess it's possible to build a big practice without it, but if you don't have a basic honesty and transparency, I think it's really difficult to build the trust that you need with your clients so that they will keep coming back. 85% of all work comes from your existing clients, as a general rule. You have to have some real professionalism and act like a great lawyer. And then, of course, confidentiality is so key for everything we do as lawyers. On top of that, you need responsiveness and communication, which I'll talk more about in a minute. And then, obviously, legal expertise and a track record. And I brought this up just because I think most people skip right to those last two. and they think, oh, I need to be a great lawyer, and it's just in terms of how much I know and what can I do for the client, and don't think about the sort of softer skills and values that have to underlie that for that to really work. So I mentioned responsiveness and communication and directness, but in terms of building trust with your clients, you have to have these things. And you may say, well, that's just that one client. What are they going to do? But word gets out, and if you don't have these things, it can ruin a really good practice, what is otherwise a really good practice. Because when you think about what's important to your clients, these things are right at the top of the list. So if you're not returning phone calls for days, if you're not um, setting expectations appropriately and communicating clearly about how things are going, that is going to, that drives clients crazy. I can tell you from the standpoint of somebody who sat on the other side, if you're not hearing from your lawyer and it's something important, then you're going crazy as a client. That you're filling that void of communication with all sorts of bad thoughts, and those eventually come back to the lawyer, and the lawyer owns those from the client standpoint. All right, so now talking about legal expertise, I think it's essential to find a niche that, I mean, there may be lawyers who can do everything well. I'm not sure I've ever met one. Uh, and it certainly makes things much, much harder if you're trying to be all things to all people. So absolutely critical to define a niche and specialize. And no big real revelations there, but a couple of things that you might want to think about is, part of that developing that niche is becoming an authority, and it's important to think hard about how you do that in a way that's authentic for you. For me, that was, I wrote a handbook on Idaho land use law when I was first learning that practice. And we after a while, we did that both for like teaching CLEs, and also for our own internal use. And what we found out, and after a while, we actually put it up on our website and offered it for free. And what we discovered after a while is that all the planners in the state wound up putting the handbook on their desks because no one else was doing that, and they needed that kind of resource. So it turned into a big, and clients would find it online and go, oh, I want to hire the people who wrote the book on this. So that worked really well. But that's certainly not for everybody. You may be much more of a relationship person. And so, can go develop a referral relationship that makes sense. And, in a lot of ways, if you just do great work, that word gets around, and you will start to see that you're at the level you need to be to get new clients from that. I'm going to talk more about referrals here a little later on. Now, I want to come back to the idea of a niche. So I read a book called 10x is easier than 2x. And it had a really interesting insight in it, which is, the things there are things that we do that, have a huge impact on our practice and on our work lives. Those are sort of the things that allow us to 10x our work. There are other things we do that are just incremental that, over time allow us to double our work. So it's a 2x approach. And the 10x things are the work that you just love, where you succeed, like I was talking about earlier, and where things seem to come very easily. And it's important to keep your eyes on that, on your work, and go, okay, where did I really kill it? What did I do extremely well? And then the 10x versus 2x approach is you just do that. Even if that's only a quarter of your work at a certain time. You say, I'm only going to do that work that I love and I kill it. Maybe that is, just all client communications and working through things with the clients. Maybe it's a certain type of contractor brief that you write, and you get rid of everything else. I mean, and I don't mean that you just don't do it. Usually it means you delegate it to somebody that you're working with. But it's hard to do, and it's really radical and really hard to say, oh, the 75, 80% of the stuff that I'm filling my time with, I'm just going to dump it all, and then I'm going to find more of the 10x work. But if you can do it, that's a way to get to $1 million practice in a hurry. Um, and as you do that, you're also better understanding your unique skills and what it is that, really sets you apart from other lawyers. So another homework question, which is if you specialized in a defined niche and built your authority, how would that help your ability to attract loyal, high-value clients? Think about some of those interactions you have with potential clients, the clients you really want, and how would that be different if you were, really killing it in a good niche? All right, I'm going to talk a little bit now about marketing and sales. Um, and might be a little bit contrarian here at times, relative to the provided wisdom for lawyers. Just from the outset, clients look for somebody they trust. I mean, and this applies to really sophisticated clients, down to ma and pa, whatever, B2C clients you might have. And part of the reason they do that way, and they usually ask somebody they know, do you know a lawyer who does this? And it's because they have no idea how to choose lawyers. If you're just interviewing or uh, going to ask questions or ask for an RFP or whatever, most clients have no idea how to choose lawyers that way. And I frankly don't think it's a very good way to choose lawyers. So, uh, you know, what everything you are doing is creating trust with that client. And if you can do that, then you're going to have a lot of success landing them. I mean, I don't think it's particularly hard for lawyers because we don't experience the kind of competition that a lot of other profession or a lot of other industries do. Um, if if a potential client, 1,000 potential clients talked to me, I landed 950 of them at least. So it wasn't difficult to close, but um, I think part of that is because I did a decent job building their trust. Okay, so that's one thing, is trust is everything. The second thing is how you build a practice in a business to business practice. versus a business to consumer practice is very different. B2B is all about relationships, and B2C, especially these days, is now much more of a numbers game and learning to do well with digital marketing, et cetera. There's a whole topic there that we don't have time to talk about today, but we have other webinars. You can look us up on YouTube, and there's a really good one I did with Matt Newbill, our head of revenue, on business to consumer, building a business to consumer practice cheaply and easily, which is more easily done than ever now with AI. So that's enough said on that. When you think about your website as part of your marketing efforts, for a B2B firm, your website is a validator. They've already done the research on you. Probably they're coming on just to say, okay, does this person look like a good lawyer? Do they understand my problem? Can they help me? And so probably a lot to say on that one. One thing I would say is I think most lawyers do a terrible job of marketing themselves on their websites, because your your client almost certainly doesn't care all the courts that you've been admitted to. They probably don't care what law school you went to, what accolades you got, what were you on the law review. I would put things, try to put yourself in your client's shoes and go, what would I want to know before I hired this lawyer? And so, relevant experience is much better. Approach to problems is much better. But again, the exercise is think about what they care about and show that on the website. And the last part here is I've seen law firms waste huge amounts of money on both traditional marketing like advertising in magazines and things like that, as well as digital marketing. And digital marketing, it is possible to throw enormous amounts of cash on a fire and burn it. So be really careful before you go into those type of efforts. Watch that webinar on YouTube about how you can build something, better and much cheaper for on your own. I want to talk a little bit about about referrals, because they're so important to building your practice and how to be strategic about that. So, a huge amount of it is to build a large and relevant network. So, that could be potential clients. So, people who you want to work with. It could be people who would refer you to clients. But I mean, you probably know who those people are. And the way you approach them, I mean, we'll give you one example later of somebody who's really good at being very direct and just, I want to work with you. What's it going to take to do that? But another really effective technique is give them something. And maybe that's a piece of interesting information. It could be a white paper. It could be a relevant news article. It could be just something fun about the community. You give someone something three times, and then you ask them for something. And they're going to be way more open to that than if you had just asked them right off the bat. So, and that may be, hey, do you have a matter that we could work on? Or it could be, can you introduce me to somebody else in your industry who might be able to use our services? You've got to be smart about that. But the key thing is give first, ask later. Um, the second thing to think about is who are the referral partners where you have the right things in common. So let me give you an example. In our firm, started as a real estate firm, still kind of the heart of it, even though it's now more a general business firm. So the partners developed great relationships with commercial brokers because when developers came into town, the broker was the first person they called because they're looking for land for their project. And the broker wants the deal to go through, so they want a good real estate law firm that is going to both be able to write all the contracts and do the transactional work, but also maybe get the land use entitlements or, um, you know, uh, do other things. Water rights might be important, or, just to be able to get that transaction through to where it will transact and the broker can get their commission. And that was, really great for a long, long time. And, really was the heart of building the largest real estate practice in our state by a long ways. The final thing to think about, and this is more to think about for y'all as individuals, is is your firm set up so that there are synergistic relationships? If you are practicing family law and everybody else is practicing real estate law, there might be a few referrals that you get back and forth among people in your firm. But if you're practicing environmental law, there's a lot bigger chance that you're going to, that you'll get referrals from members of your firm and you'll be able to, and vice versa. So, think about trying to put yourself in a place where you're adjacent to other people's practices, because it's much, much harder if you don't have that. Okay, let's talk about sales for a minute. So, you know, a lot of times or the clients already made up their mind when they call you. Not all the time, but they're pretty deep into their research process. Um, and, they know a lot at that point. So I think the first thing that I learned that was really important is listen first, listen 80%, talk 20%. And as you're listening, what you're trying to understand is, okay, I'm going to not be the know-it-all here, but I want to understand what's important to this client. And then you address their concerns directly. Now, obviously, before you actually accept the representation, you have some limitations there, but usually you can give somebody some idea, you understand the matter, you know what they're talking about, and there's some general direction that you can convey to them. And that's going to build that trust. And the more you have really tied into what they really care about, the more that's going to resonate and the easier it's going to be to close that matter. And, this sounds simple, but it's amazing how often lawyers go off talking about themselves in these situations rather than focusing on the client and their problems, because the clients care about what they're worried about. They don't care about your diploma. They don't care about your war stories or anything like that. All right, I threw this in here because in talking with the people um, who who I talked to get ready for this, work-life balance came up a lot, and that's something that million-dollar practitioners struggle with a lot, and it's hard. And I don't think it's something you should try to handle yourself. Um, that's the best I can say as somebody who probably didn't do the greatest job of this all the time. But, make that family time a priority and treat it as the most important thing. And, you set expectations with your significant other and get their help to help you prioritize family as, equally with your work. So, and then set some goals for how much time you're going to spend at home. Um, I had one of the people I interviewed for this. They said uh, they track their time, both billable, non-billable, and their home time. And what he said to me was, if you don't know how you're spending your time, you don't know how you're spending your life. So, I think that's a really great intention to, you know, very intentionally decide this amount of time belongs to my family, and I'm going to work around that, and the practice will work, you know. And looking back on it, I probably violated that rule way too many times, and my advice is don't do that, and make family a priority. I have my firm had a really nice sabbatical program, and I think that can be a good way of helping to get that balance as well. All right, so I went on maybe too long on those points, but I've got a few minutes to talk about sort of the specific people that or the case studies for this. Um, and so the first one is what I call the technician. And what I want to do here is, I didn't put anybody in here who was kind of the natural, who just loved to schmooze and, where building relationships and referrals was super easy. I wanted to put some different people and maybe some more introverted people in here to give you some inspiration. But this lawyer is very smart, pretty nerdy. Um, Kind of sounds like, well, the nerdy part sounds like me. Um, but what he was able to do, he was an architect before he became a lawyer, just practiced for a few years. And he was able to build a number of technical niches around that core competency. And they were as tiny as the AIA architectural contracts. So he knew more about those and how you build those than anybody. And so had a natural client base with those architects. And he was able to expand that to historic preservation, public-private finance, and to very sophisticated real estate transactions. So he now has a huge practice and way more work that he can do. But he really understood his unique skills. He built internal networks within our firm to do that niche work that, he could do better than anybody else. And he had related community activities, like he was on the design review committee at the city and worked for the homeless shelter, stuff like that. So did an amazing job as maybe an unlikely $1 million practitioner. I know another guy who did not work for my firm, but he was totally different. I call him the bold visionary. So he started out as a litigator in a relatively small firm, and like a lot of people, discovered he didn't love litigation, although he was very good at arguing, and that seemed like maybe a good fit for him. But he was able to find some client relationships and moved into sophisticated commercial lending, and then representing PE and VC firms, and just did the work he needed to learn all of that, because none of that was in his background. And he was very direct, asking clients for business and adapting his career path to what he wanted it. So he started with a small firm, ended up with in an AmLaw 100 firm, and has a huge and successful practice. So I have a partner who is what I call the lawyer's lawyer. And he's one of these people who loves the law and especially can go really deep, unlike almost anybody I know. And he established a niche in water law from scratch. Uh, Coming out, he was a college law school professor actually for a while before he came out and worked for a nonprofit agency. Uh, but it was, so he built, and then he built adjacent practices that required that depth and technical understanding of the law. So things like road law, land use law, constitutional law, municipal law. So he had this ability to go deep and just a general love and interest in the law that allowed him to build an amazing practice that he's 70 years old and he still loves doing it. God bless him. uh, and then finally, my own mentee who came to our firm as a water lawyer, was working for a solo attorney and decided she wanted to try land use law. She developed some really useful community connections in doing that. She had superpower of building trust with clients. When we looked at her strength finder, she had a characteristic called woo, which none of the rest of us had, which, really made building those client relationships really easy. She was a great team builder. She had a workhorse associate and others she delegates to. I think she has 5 or 6 attorneys and paralegals working for her now. And she was able to do all of this with no direct marketing. And part of that was building on my practice and the firm's practice. But there was also a change in the marketplace, which she spotted and took advantage of, which is our city grew. And so the type of developers who came to town changed. And so they already had the land acquisition taken care of, and the transactional part. So the first call was to the local land use lawyer. So all of a sudden, she was getting, she was the originator for all sorts of new clients. So with somebody in that position, she put herself in a great position, and she just was great at building trust and community connections. Now, as for me, I had kind of a accidental practice. Neither litigation nor transactional were great fits for me. I tried real estate law to begin with in a firm in San Diego. I had a chance to try environmental law. It was really good for me because it was detailed and technical. Was able to leverage that administrative law experience into a land use practice through the land use handbook, as I mentioned, and created a hedge. So this is a point to think about. If you have a practice that's cyclical, like environmental law tends to be politically cyclical, then I had a backup in land use that was also cyclical based on economic cycles, and was able to balance those out. So I was always busy, even after the 2008 Great Recession. So what I learned from that is, you got to know yourself and move to something that works for you, adapt, and delegate, as I did to my mentee and others, to have a successful practice. All right, so we've got just a minute or so left. I didn't leave myself enough time for the admin's role here. So I'm going to go through that kind of quickly. Um, so you, I think there's a big role that admins can play in supporting a $1 million practice. You can't do everything. The lawyers have to want it, but you have to understand your lawyer's superpowers and what's really going to help them do the best and probably lead them a little bit because they aren't always willing to, they want to practice law. This is a sidelight for them. So there are things you can do to support them. Schedule a weekly business development time. Prepare and maintain a network contact list. Draft follow-up emails. Monitor and track leads. All the things that are easy to fall through the cracks that are necessary to get new clients. Help create content and visibility support so you can assist with blog posts and social media and newsletters, coordinate speaking opportunities, and track progress. Have a client check-ins, provide referral reports, research competitors and industry trends. Much easier now with AI to get that information. So my question to the admins that I want you to take home is, what would be the impact if you consistently supported your attorney's business development efforts with structured follow-up and tracking? And I bet there could be a pretty big impact of that with the right lawyer. So think about that. So key takeaways from today: build on your unique skills, delegate early and effectively, and leverage your staff to maximize growth. I'm saying that speaking to the lawyers in the audience. So we are over time, but I'm happy to stick around for questions if anybody has any. And I don't see any in here, so you're all going to get an email that will link you to more resources. So the slides and recording, an evaluation of the program, the law firm report card I discussed. And I'd love it if you'd fill it out and return it to me. I'll give you a customized financial analysis for your firm based on your answers. And then I am more than happy to talk with any of you for a free consultation. I had some that were really fun from the last time I did this webinar. So thank you so much. Appreciate your time and attention. And if there are no further questions, the webinar is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.